Essay number 5. The modern image of the future as a technological society. In the modern era, we discover the culmination of 5,000 years of successive empires that have legitimized violence and killing as a means of territorial expansion, dominion, and social control. So the modern consciousness is one that has evolved from this foundation by accepting killing as the price of the good life that modernity brings through the advances of science and technology. In fact, one could very well say that the modern image of the future is that of the technological society. If this is indeed the guiding vision of the modern future, then the question of the position of technological society toward killing is critical. In other words, is the technological society neutral when it comes to killing, as some contend, or is killing fundamental to its modus operandi? According to Jacques Ellul, in his classic study, the notion that technique is neutral is naive and useless because it does not understand the dynamic, autonomous, self-augmented, monistic, universal nature of technique in the modern era. The pursuit of technique has come to define the modern image of the future, subsuming everything else in its path. Hence, throughout modern history, as wars of conquest spread all over the world, vanquished peoples were filled with such a mixture of admiration and fear that they adopted the conqueror's machines, which came to replace their gods. The machine became the supreme symbol of power, since at the same time, it posed the possible means for liberation from these conquerors. It is not as if the vanquished people had a choice in the matter. They could either embrace the machine as the means of liberation or face extinction. In other words, they had to embrace the killing power of the machine or else be exterminated by it if they refused. And this led to the birth of the arms race. And all the, quote, instruments of power began to flourish as a means of provoking insurrection. End of quote. Moreover, to the degree that, quote, these peoples became better organized, a technicized rebellion became a national affair. War provokes the sudden and stupefying adaptation of the savage to machinery and discipline. End of quote. This process of assimilation through advances in the techniques of war is the ritual of initiation into the vicious killing cycle of modern civilization, which cultivates a machine-like consciousness that seems to transcend the moral concepts of good and evil in favor of that which is most efficient, as the means become an end in itself, and the war industry increasingly attains a permanent status and feature of technical civilization. Ellul presents a convincing argument that humankind does not master technique for either good or evil. Rather, technique is the master, whose modern image of the future is the image of the machine, impervious to moral judgment. Technique does not accept the, quote, existence of rules outside itself or of any norm. Still less will it accept any judgment upon it. As a consequence, no matter where it penetrates, what it does is permitted, lawful, justified. End of quote. Now, some may object and contend that technique can be transformed and wielded for only good purposes, as if the end of technique is human good. However, elaborating on the autonomous nature of technique, Ellul argues that this view is wrong-headed, for technique is totally irrelevant to the notion of human good. Instead, it evolves in a, quote, purely causal way. The combination of preceding elements furnishes the new technical elements. There's no purpose or plan that is progressively realized. There's not even a tendency towards human ends. We are dealing with a phenomenon blind to the future in a domain of integral causality. End of quote. For example, let's take a look at the technical process involved in the invention of the atom bomb. As Ellul explains, the fact that the atom bomb was created, quote, before the atomic engine was not essentially the result of the perversity of technical men. The action of the state was certainly the deciding factor in atomic research. Research was greatly accelerated by the necessities of war and consequently directed toward a bomb. If the state had not been oriented towards the ends of war, it would not have devoted so much money to atomic research. End of quote. As Ellul concludes, if the state had not supported this effort, no atomic research would have been conducted in the first place, so no question of the peaceful use of nuclear energy would have even been posed. Therefore, continues Ellul, the atomic bomb is a transitory but unfortunately necessary stage in the general evolution of this technique. In the interim period, represented by the bomb, the possessor of finding himself with such a powerful instrument is led to use it. Why? Because everything concerning technique is necessarily used as soon as it is available, without distinction of good or evil. This is the principal law of our age, says Ellul, as he quotes Jacques Cousteau's well-known remark in May of 1960 regarding the atomic bomb, quote, since it was possible, it was necessary, end of quote. This, quote, principal law of our age, end of quote, that defines our civilization through its image of the future as a technical civilization is what is of concern here regarding the image of a non-killing future. In Ellul's words, technical civilization means that, quote, our civilization is constructed by technique, and in that everything in this civilization must serve a technical end. Actually, it is exclusively technique, in that it excludes whatever is not technique and reduces it to technical form. End of quote. This inversion of technique distinctively marks the modern era. As Ellul notes, without exception, in the course of history, quote, technique belonged to a civilization and was merely a single element among a host of non-technical activities. Today, technique has taken over the whole of civilization. Certainly, technique is no longer the simple machine substitute for human labor. It has come to be the intervention into the very substance, not only of the inorganic, but also of the organic. End of quote. That's why today we find that nuclear weapons, the supreme symbol of the power to kill, have increasingly attained an autonomous nature. In other words, nuclear weapons systems have evolved out of human hands as they become more computerized with automated alerts in place in the event of a nuclear attack. And once an attack begins, whether by accident, glitch, or intention, the system responds automatically, while the possibilities for human intervention have become increasingly less possible. And in this decisive evolution, we should be warned of the grave, fatal consequences. Consider Ellul's insight on the autonomous nature of the evolution of technical systems, in which humans do not play a part. Quote, technical elements combine among themselves, and they do so more and more spontaneously. In the future, man will apparently be confined to the role of a recording device. He will note the effects of techniques upon one another and register the results. End of quote. The problem with this scenario, of course, is when, for one reason or another, a glitch in the complex automated nuclear weapons system causes its responses to spin out of control, erupting into global nuclear holocaust. Under such conditions, the prospects for a non-killing world are no longer a matter for humans to even consider. It's out of the question, since no longer do humans have a say about killing or non-killing. This is the very nature of the technological society with industrial civilization. Increasingly, in the interest of technical efficiency, the decision-making process has been taken out of human hands and placed under the jurisdiction of the machine, which does not conform to the norms of human morality or judgment, whose only interest is the interest of efficiency, transforming everything, including human life, into means. A little ask a rhetorical question which still reverberates almost 50 years later. The tool enables man to conquer, but man does not know that there is no more victory that is thy victory. The victory of our days belongs to the tool. The tool alone has the power and carries off the victory. The individual obeys and no longer has victory that is his own. He cannot have access to his apparent triumph except by himself becoming the object of technique and the offspring of the mating of man and machine. End of quote.